In Naruto, battles are never just about trading punches. Victory often depends on who can outthink their opponent, find a weakness, and force them into making exactly the mistake they need. That's why, over the years, fans have come up with dozens of fights that could have been incredible but were never actually shown. Today, we're breaking down some of the most interesting ones, and we're starting with one of the most debated matchups among fans: Itachi Uchiha versus Tobi, who was eventually revealed to be Obito. For a long time, Obito avoided taking direct action against Itachi because he understood that a living Itachi could potentially stop him. That's where the popular theory came from that the masked man was supposedly afraid of Itachi. But fear is probably too strong a word. It was more likely respect for Itachi's strength and a clear understanding of how dangerous he really was. Still, if these two had actually fought, who would have come out on top? Let's start with Genjutsu. Both of them were incredibly dangerous in this area. Itachi had Tsukuyomi, one of the most powerful illusion techniques in the series, while Obito was capable of controlling the Nine Tails with nothing more than his Sharingan. Because of that, Itachi probably wouldn't immediately rely on Tsukuyomi. He would know there was a real chance of wasting a huge amount of chakra for nothing. The situation gets even more complicated when we look at Itachi's regular attacks. Obito could avoid his fire techniques thanks to his intangibility. The same problem applies to Susanoo. Even legendary weapons like the Totsuka Blade and Yata Mirror wouldn't guarantee Itachi a victory, because first, he would actually have to land a hit on an opponent who can simply phase through attacks. Obito, meanwhile, has a very straightforward win condition: Kamui. If he catches Itachi at the right moment, he can pull him into his dimension and effectively end the fight. But there's an important catch. Itachi knew that Obito had to become tangible at certain moments while using Kamui. That means a single opening could potentially decide the entire battle. And Itachi had one more, much stranger option: Izanami. Obito had spent years hiding behind another identity, rejecting his past and even his own fate. In theory, that makes him an especially interesting target for the technique. But there's a major problem. Itachi would need to intentionally set up Izanami from the beginning. Trying to improvise it in the middle of the fight could give Obito enough time to shut the plan down. So personally, I'd give the edge to Obito. But this is exactly the kind of fight where one mistake could completely change the outcome. And that's what makes matchups like this so interesting in Naruto. Now let's move on to a completely different kind of battle. The Chunin exams gave us plenty of memorable fights, but there was one matchup we never got to see: Sasuke Uchiha versus Neji Hyuga, a clash between two of Konoha's most impressive young users of powerful dojutsu. Early in the story, this fight would have been especially interesting, because neither character had reached the later power-ups we eventually saw. On one side, Sasuke had his two Tomoe Sharingan and Chidori. On the other, Neji had the Byakugan and a highly developed taijutsu style. According to the first databook, they were roughly equal in speed and ninjutsu, but Neji had the advantage in taijutsu, strength, and intelligence. And that matters a lot, because his fighting style was specifically designed to pressure opponents at close range. Neji's biggest weapon was the gentle fist. His rotation also allowed him to repel physical attacks with ease. In the first databook, the effectiveness of this defense was even compared to Gaara's sand. We already know what happened when Sasuke tried to break through Gaara's defense with Chidori, so his fire techniques probably wouldn't have been especially effective against Neji's rotation either. But Sasuke still had one major trump card: Chidori. If he could create enough distance and land it at the right moment, Neji would be in serious trouble. The problem is that creating that opening would be extremely difficult. Sasuke could start with Shuriken, but Neji's Byakugan would let him track their movements with ease. Then Sasuke could try to move into close combat, using the Sharingan to read Neji's movements while constantly avoiding the gentle fist. After that, Sasuke would probably retreat and try a fireball jutsu. Neji would answer with rotation, and Sasuke would suddenly realize that his attack had barely done anything. Kakashi may not even have told him everything about the Hyuga fighting style. And now Sasuke would have to find another way to create the opening he needed for Chidori. Shadow clones probably wouldn't save him either. At best, Sasuke could create a couple of combat-capable clones, but Neji's rotation would tear through them quickly. On top of that, Sasuke originally trained to fight Gaara, an opponent who preferred fighting from a distance and wasn't especially fast. Neji would be a completely different type of opponent. He specialized in close combat and had a clear advantage over Sasuke and taijutsu. If the fight dragged on, Neji could gradually shut down Sasuke's key tenketsu. At that point, Sasuke's options would shrink with every second. His only real chance would be landing Chidori at exactly the right moment before Neji could take away his ability to fight effectively. So I'd give the victory to Neji. But it would still be a fascinating fight because both of them have multiple possible win conditions. And if Kishimoto himself had written this matchup, the result could have been completely different. The next matchup looks much less balanced, but that's exactly what makes it interesting. Kakashi Hatake versus Kabuto Yakushi. At one point in the story, Kishimoto created a sense of rivalry between these two talented shinobi. Both were extremely intelligent and capable, but their fighting styles were completely different. According to the second databook, Kakashi had the advantage over Kabuto in ninjutsu, taijutsu, strength, and speed. They were roughly equal in intelligence, chakra, and hand seals. Kabuto's one clear advantage was genjutsu, but even there, Kakashi had enough experience to prevent that single advantage from deciding the entire fight. Kakashi was also a true all-around fighter. He could use a huge variety of techniques and constantly change his approach depending on the opponent. Kabuto, meanwhile, was primarily a medical ninja at that point in the story. He was extremely dangerous and incredibly intelligent, but he himself preferred to avoid direct confrontations. Kabuto's main offensive weapon was his chakra scalpel. Most of his other abilities were either highly situational or focused more on defense and healing. Shikon no Jutsu required a suitable corpse nearby, while his medical abilities alone didn't give him enough offensive power to match Kakashi. On top of that, the copy ninja could potentially learn some of Kabuto's techniques and turn them against him. Even Kabuto's famous fight against Tsunade doesn't give him the kind of advantage people might assume. At the time, Kabuto had used special chakra pills, while Tsunade was far from her best mental state. If she had actually fought at full strength, the outcome would have looked very different. So using that battle as proof that Kabuto could overpower Kakashi wouldn't really make sense. That's why Kakashi looks like the obvious favorite in a direct confrontation. He has the better overall combat stats, a much more versatile arsenal, and experience fighting all kinds of opponents. Kabuto could still surprise him with an unexpected move or try to win through strategy, but the longer the fight continued, the more Kakashi's advantage would grow. But next, we're getting to a completely different level of matchup. Two fights involving one of the most dangerous Uchiha in the entire series. Now let's move on to a fight that many fans wanted to see simply because it feels almost impossible. Itachi Uchiha versus Shisui Uchiha. Two geniuses from the same clan, both served in the Anbu, both were masters of genjutsu, and both used crows in battle. But who would actually come out on top? The most interesting part is that we simply don't have enough information to answer that question with certainty. Shisui had a major advantage in genjutsu. Just look at Kotoa Matsukami, an ability so dangerous that it could secretly alter a person's will. Shisui was also considered one of the fastest shinobi of his generation, and was a master of body flicker techniques. Some additional material even referred to him as the strongest among the Uchiha, although that isn't part of the main canon, so it shouldn't be treated as definitive proof. Still, the idea makes sense. Shisui was clearly an incredibly dangerous shinobi. But there's one important detail that's easy to forget. If we're talking about the period when Shisui was still alive, Itachi wasn't yet the Itachi we know from later in the story. He didn't have the full arsenal of the Mangekyo Sharingan, so you can't simply give him Tsukuyomi, Amaterasu, and Susanoo and call the fight before it even begins. That's why I wouldn't confidently pick a winner here. Shisui could potentially try to end the fight with genjutsu before Itachi even had a chance to launch a serious attack. But if Itachi managed to read his movements and avoid being caught, the battle would quickly turn into a test of speed, reaction time, and strategy. And in a fight like this, the first major mistake could easily be the last. But now, let's move on to an even crazier matchup. Two legendary Uchiha who were never supposed to openly fight each other, and if they had, the entire story could have changed. Madara Uchiha versus Obito Uchiha. On paper, this already sounds like a final boss battle. One created the plan for the infinite Tsukuyomi, while the other spent years trying to carry it out. But what if, at some point, they stopped being allies and actually decided to find out who was stronger? First, let's look at the most dangerous version of Obito. After he became the Ten Tails Jinchuriki, Madara would immediately have a serious problem. Normal ninjutsu would be almost useless against truth-seeking balls, meaning his massive arsenal of fire-style techniques and even Susanoo wouldn't guarantee anything. On top of that, Obito had incredible speed, overwhelming power, and his own Rinnegan. And the biggest issue is that Madara wouldn't simply need to defeat Obito, he would need to extract the tailed beasts from him. But getting that close to the Ten Tails Jinchuriki would be extremely difficult. Obito could destroy techniques with the truth-seeking balls, and even attempts to suppress his power with wood style would be highly questionable. We already saw how difficult he was to control. Still, Madara wouldn't be Madara if he simply gave up. So let's say he entered the fight with Hashirama's chakra and had an enormous boost beforehand. Now Senjutsu comes into play, and his Susanoo becomes even more dangerous. This version of Madara could absolutely give Obito a serious challenge. And if you only looked at individual moments, Madara could probably survive for quite a while. His combat experience was ridiculous, and his intelligence allowed him to quickly analyze an opponent and look for weaknesses. But the problem remains. Obito is simply on another level when you combine all of his abilities. His truth-seeking balls can destroy almost any defense. His speed lets him control the pace of the fight, and the sheer power of the Ten Tails makes a normal exchange of attacks almost meaningless. So the real question is this: can Madara actually deal enough damage to finish the fight before Obito eventually takes control? And that's what makes Naruto battles so interesting. Sometimes the winner isn't the character with more raw power, it's the one whose abilities are better suited to the opponent in front of them. We've only covered a few of the fights we never got to see, but which one would you have wanted to watch the most? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more Naruto breakdowns.